What's up, dog?
Stevie, goddammit, this isn't a good time right now.
Oh, really? I thought it was always a good time to get f***ing rich.
What are you talking about?
Got a little call from Ashley Schaefer today, and he was talking big money, Kenny. I'm talking $500. Half of that in cash, half of it in coupons to local businesses, baby.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another week of Muskies on Tap. Bringing to you episode 44 this week as we bring the interview in with Rich Reinert, who has been in the muskie industry for a very, very long time, as we discuss in this interview, and all the things that he has had his hand in, from braided lines to building rods, lures, starting Musky Expos, guiding for, like you said, 46 or some years, which is just unbelievable wealth of knowledge there that we barely even tap into. We're for sure going to have him on again. We talk about the Wausau show coming up here. Max and I will also discuss the George's Minnesota Musky Expo that's happening this weekend after this comes out, March 8th to the 10th. I'll quickly touch on that. I'll be in the Team Rhino Outdoors booth all weekend with Jeff, and I'll have all the hats and very limited supplies of the hoodies there. If you could come and visit me there, and Jeff and all the amazing baits that he has there as well would be awesome. But before I get any further, let's introduce the other member of Muskies on Tap. We're lacking on one, but we got none other than Max on here tonight. How you doing tonight, Max?
I'm doing really good tonight, Gus. Excited to have you come into town here for the Minnesota Musky Expo. Be staying with me here for a few nights. We'll be in and out of the shows. Like you said, you'll be at the Team Rhino booth. I'll probably just be kind of wandering around, seeing if anything catches my eye. Might pop into a few seminars, kind of check that out. But yeah, looking forward to the weekend. Should be a really fun time. Very sad that we don't have our buddy Brian on here tonight, but you know what? He's rolling up his sleeves. He had to work a little late tonight, so no worries there. I'm sure he'll bring the heat next week when he pops back on. But I think you guys are really going to enjoy this interview here. We cover, Gus, we just covered a lot of topics tonight with Rich that were all really interesting. Everything like you mentioned, all the way back to stories on Tony Rizzo, a famous guide up here in northern Wisconsin. So a lot of good stuff. Learned a lot from him, and excited to bring this one to you guys. So why don't you fire that one up there, Gus?
All right, everybody. Here on the line, we have Rich Reinert, who he's been in the muskie game for a really, really long time. A lot of accolades that I could name off. We'll for sure get into a few, but to name a few, he started a lot of the Muskie Expos. We'll chat about the one in Wausau coming up here in 2 weeks. We got the George's Muskie Expo in Minnesota coming up this weekend, and also guiding for a very, very long time. So, Rich, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Gus. How are you doing?
I'm doing great as well.
Max?
Yeah.
Muskie Max.
I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to diving into this one. You got me all fired up before the interview talking about some of the things we're going to go into here tonight. So, yeah, awesome. Gus, you want to start maybe firing away with talking Wausau?
Well, sure. Let's maybe before we go for the Wausau show, let's go into the expos in general. Rich, you just were telling us here before we started that you started a few a long time ago. If you want to maybe get into that, just so that the listeners know and have a good background and history of you.
Well, I've been in the business, for a long time, 46 years, I was in the business. I started working with a lot of the tackle companies uh, I think I always had an idea that I was going to guide, and I'd probably still be guiding to this day. But I think there's a lot of changes, and I think you see that, Gus. You're up in Eagle River, you see some of the changes. Maybe you're not aware of some of the changes, but if you would have told me, 15 years ago that I wasn't going to be guiding, at least in the Northwoods, I would have thought you were nuts. But I think there's some changing. I think there's changes going on up there. I think I made some right decisions. But that being said, in my days when I was guiding, I, I came up with an idea of having a one species show. So at the time, Travis Richardson, who was a guide down in the Madison chain, we went and talked to Doug Reuter, and I told him of my ideas. He was a man that had experience with running shows, and basically that's how it started. The first show was the Milwaukee Musky Expo. I worked with Doug for about 3 years, and helping him get the thing up and going. Had a hand in helping George Wall when he started Minnesota, and Mark Zeke, back in the day when Chicago first started, Mark Zeke, Steve Statlin, and Bill Davis, Mark would come to me and, just pick my brain or whatever, but I had my hand in pretty much all of them. And then I finally thought to myself, hey, there was a lot of people that did not want to go south to the cities. So that's when we started, we started the Wausau show. And so my wife and I, my wife Penny, and we got everything put together, and away we went. And here we are 15 years later. So today, Mike Etzel, he takes care of all the day-to-day stuff. I keep my, my fingers in it, and we all talk amongst ourselves as far as decisions, and we just keep doing our thing, and here we are 15 years later.
So what were the expectations like for that first show in Wausau? Because it's not it's not a Milwaukee, it's not a Chicago, it's not a Minneapolis. So take us back to that first show. What were the expectations? How did it go? And also, kind of how it's changed from, that first year to what it is today.
Well, Max, I think my expectations at the time, what I was looking for is, when I looked at the other shows and everything going on, I think, I've discussed this a little bit in the past about, there were faces, in the muskie industry. And, these faces were around for a very long time. And what I mean by faces is you had guys like Al Lindner, Spence Petros. You had, Tony Porton-Queso. I mentioned that name for a reason, and we'll come back to that. But some of the hardcore muskie people like Tony Rizzo, everybody's heard of Tony Rizzo, and that's where my beginning started with guiding. Is, I like Gus. We were talking earlier. Gus, started guiding, and it's like he's by himself. He's trying to market his name and get things started. But I had somebody big behind me backing me up, and that was Tony Rizzo. I used to take Tony Rizzo's overload. So Tony would set me up 3-4 days a week. And I look at it now, and that was quite an honor, because Tony trusted that I would do the job for the people that he was sending to me. So I didn't have, back in those days, we didn't have podcast. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't, social media. We didn't have, it was word of mouth. And, we built, I built a guide business. It worked fine. And then we had a hiccup, and that was the spearing, the Native American spearing. And we're not here to discuss that. That's fine, but it hurt. It had a bearing on the Northwoods. That being said, are there still muskies there? Of course there are. But guys like Gus have got to become more efficient and more shrewd, in their presentations, where they're fishing, how they're going to go about, finding those fish for their customers. Whereas we didn't have to worry about that.
So take us back a little bit then. How did you get hooked up with Rizzo to the point where, he's given you his kind of overdraft of clients, because that's some pretty big shoes to fill. I'd imagine you were feeling some extra pressure as a young guy just starting out. Plus now you got guys that were hoping to fish with Rizzo. No offense to a young Rich Reinert, but now they're getting to the boat.
That's right. I agree 100%.
Now they're getting to the boat with a younger kid, and now and off you go. I mean, how did that all kind of get started, and what was that?
I was just like Gus. I just showed up at his doorstep one day. I actually stopped by to buy some of Tony's Marabou bucktails. That's how that happened. And we sat down and I don't know. It was like a blur. I was a young guy. We always kept, he liked my attitude. He liked my spunk, my tenacity. But he also, when we would sit and have conversations, I think we talked about things that a lot of guys don't, a lot of, aspiring musky guides or musky fishermen don't talk about. And I think, he could see that. I mean, we talked about keeping logs. We talked about weather and how weather affects, location of the fish and, weather, barometric pressure, where the fish are going to be, how that affects their strike zone. That's the key thing. To me, those are the key things in musky fishing. I think today, guys, and this is not a bad thing. I mean, they watch YouTube and they listen to podcasts, and there's so much information about musky fishing out there today that a lot of the guys, that's what they're keyed into, is to pick up their knowledge from that. But we didn't have that. So we had to learn ourselves and talk amongst ourselves. And trust me when I say this, I've seen a lot of fishermen take credit of things that Tony actually pioneered, and yet they try to, basically tell everybody that they pioneered it. But when you look at the documentation, and what I mean by documentation, Tony was an author of 7 books. And, so when you look at the dates that those books were printed, and he talked about summer suspended muskies, or he talked about late fall and fishing open water, then all of a sudden, 4 or 5 years later, then all of a sudden there's other guys taking credit for what Tony already put in the books. So Tony was truly a pioneer in a lot of ways, especially in Gus's backyard. You live in Eagle River, correct, Gus?
Yeah, that's correct.
You live in Eagle River. Well, Tony was in Star Lake. So many of the lakes that you are fishing today, I can tell you right now, were the same waters that Tony Rizzo was fishing. Max had asked, how did I get involved? I mean, like I said, I kind of showed up and Tony kind of just took me under his wing. And the next thing I know, he was happy with what he saw me do on the water. And next thing I know, he's saying, come on, Richie. He always called me Richie because he's Italian. And it was explained to me later on in life that Italians, when they put an E on the end of your name, it's like terms of endearment, that has
funny.
a big honor. So he would be calling you Gussie, or Maxie. But Italians always end everything. It's not Rich, it's Richie or Joey. That's the way Italians are. And Tony was a Chicago Italian, and so, that's what was explained to me. But I miss the old guy. He was a great fisherman. When I look at the things that he was doing back then, he was so far ahead of everybody. And I'm going to tell you this for fact. I had access to his logbooks. I could see where all his big fish came from. Wow. I know how many big fish. My wife Penny has been in his, we've been down in his basement, his office basement, many, many times. The man has put 330 pounders in the boat, predominantly in northern Wisconsin. With his way he fished, he has 2 47 pounders, one in Canada, and he has one in northern Wisconsin. He had a 46 pounder. He's boated a lot of big fish. His personal biggest was 41 pounds. So Gus, sometime we'll have to talk about that because I'm pretty privy to all those lakes. And I guarantee you some of the lakes that he was fishing, guess what? Nobody still fishes to this day.
I mean,
Yes, he
that's
did.
probably true.
And a lot of truth to that. And so, you know, I missed the old guy. I mean, he was very fond of my wife Penny. Penny proofread two of his books that he printed. Matter of fact,
Oh,
in one of his last books, it was Secrets of a Muskie Guide 2 and Summer Suspended Muskies. There on the back cover, there's a picture of Tony and I fishing. And then I think I also wrote the forward to that book. And like I said, my wife proofread two of the books for him because Tony's English wasn't always the best, and the Italian definitely
Yeah.
came out wrote. So he was a great guy. He was truly, and he didn't get the recognition. So going back to the question you said, why did I start the Wausau Musky Expo? Because along with, I wanted to give some people a stage, a platform to talk about their guiding, because what was happening at some of the other shows back then, they had all the named fishermen and they almost controlled, who was going to talk at those shows.
hmm.
So when I started the Wisconsin Musky Expo, I did it so that guys like Tony Rizzo had a platform again to speak to the people. Gus, you know what? I've already got you set up for next year in the 2025, Muskie Expo. We talked. I hope
Hmm.
you're looking forward to that because you're going to be speaking in 2025. And
Yeah.
so, Max, huh?
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you for the opportunity, and I mean, I'll thank him at the show, but thanks to Taylor Flannery for putting in the good word for me as
It
well.
was it was Taylor Flannery that actually got me to pay attention to you and watching what you were doing. And I think you have I believe that you're going to be one of the future named guides, in northern Wisconsin. Taylor Flannery, great guy.
Hmm.
He's same thing. I think he's going to be one of the faces, the new faces of the muskie world, from guiding. Michael Hansen, we were talking about him before at the show at Minnesota, at Milwaukee, and we were talking. I mean, he's going to be the bomb. I mean,
Yeah, he's
Michael
already
Hansen,
putting giant fish in the boat consistently
and you know
too.
what?
It's nuts.
You're right. He's the
Hmm.
guy that there's a lot of old timers in Hayward have complained about the fact there's no big fish left, and yet Michael Hansen is making them a liar. He's putting so many big
Yeah.
fish in the boat. We aren't seeing all the big fish he's put in the boat. I know I went fishing with Michael, this past summer. We were out fishing and we took Penny, and a lot of people know I've got some heart issues, So we were out in a small lake out by Iron County, and we were going down the road, there was two trees down and we couldn't get through. And first of all, Michael's concern was my health. We're out in the middle of nowhere and he didn't know how we were going to get into this lake. I said, screw it. I said, turn this thing around, back that boat up, and let's pull that boat across those trees. Well, how far is that lake? Let's get it in. So we did. Long story short, we kind of sat back, we we talked. Penny put 4 fish in the boat in 3.5 hours. So of course she
Wow.
had a blast.
Hmm.
And but to watch Michael, how he handled everything in that boat that evening, and how he treated Penny, you know, told me a lot about that man's integrity and his professionalism in this business. I mean, he's going to be the next Tony Rizzo. He really is. And that's not taking anything away from anybody else, but there's a lot of people that want to be a fishing guide, but there are certain people that are cut out to be a fishing guide. And Gus, I think you're one of those.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate those kind words. I mean, yeah, for to be a fishing guide, what I've learned so far in my first 2 years is more than just catching fish. It's really offering an experience for the anglers out there and kind of just dropping all the knowledge that you know, and having, you know, it all boils down to boat control and very minute things that maybe not everybody on a day-to-day basis thinks about, you know, which is why there's always a lot of questions that people put out there. You know, the weekend warriors always asking like, how do I dial in a pattern, or how do I use rubber effectively? And, you know, when is top water the best time, you know, and you know, that's all good stuff too. But yeah, like you're talking about Michael as a character, like his character, it's incredible. We've had him on the podcast twice now, and I've met him in person now a few times, and I'm excited to see him again at the upcoming shows. I mean, he's just a really, really great guy, and I
That
would
dude's got
assume
some
it's
nerve,
all the
doesn't he?
same in the boat, you know, all the same in the
Yeah,
boat
he
too.
is. He knows how to treat people. I know guys that have fished with them and say the same thing about him. You know, nothing. He's unscathed by anything. Nothing phases him. He just gets it done for the people, and I believe that's so. I know Taylor's the same way. You know, I mean, listen,
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Van Remortel. You know, I mean, he needs no introduction. You know, he's another that hard fisherman, and he puts a lot of big fish in a boat for his customers. Um, back when I started guiding, it wasn't really important for us to, flash our photos around. I mean, it was what was important to me was the people in the boat. I mean, basically, that's what it boiled down to. And so I took care of my people. Um, and that was my job. I think today
Mm-hmm.
it's harder. In a way it's easier, but yet it's harder because there's so many people coming into this that want to do this, and I think some for the wrong reasons, and then there's some of you that are doing this for the right reasons. And I look at you and I kind of see you in me when I was your age, and
Yeah.
it's a struggle. You've got a lot of things that are against you that I didn't have back when I started, and I also had the benefit, of having someone like Tony Rizzo backing me up.
Sure. Well, let's get into some of the differences then, I guess, of maybe starting out guiding or just fishing in general today, as opposed to when you started guiding or fishing. What are maybe despite the I mean, we can get into electronics too, but despite electronics, other than that,
I'm
what
not worried
are
about the
some
electronics.
yeah, what are some differences from then
Well,
to
first
now?
and foremost, in your backyard, you've got to deal with it's a fact of life is Native American spearing. There's
Hmm.
no doubt about that. Here, this is the best way to put it. During the winter months, what does a fishing guy do? You're out on the ice fishing walleyes. I've watched your posts. You've been out the last 6, 7 nights, fishing
Yeah.
for walleyes when a lot of guys are sitting in front of the TV watching, soap operas or whatever it is they're watching, but you're out actually fishing. So, you're doing it. A lot of guys, don't do it. They're you're out there, living it. You're walking the walk. Um, but what I would do during the winter months, I used to go out on the ice and I would watch, and this was hard for me, but I would actually keep track of some of the spearing. And a lot of people talk about the spring spearing. That's nothing compared to what goes on during the winter months. They probably
Hmm.
take 5 times the fish during the winter months, and there's no count. There's no quotas. There's nothing. They just spear. I would go out on Big Arbor Vita, and back then, when they're taking 10 fish a day, let's just, Arbor Vita. Let's say that was a great musky lake.
Hmm.
And so let's say in a great musky lake, you've got, say, one muskie per acre. Well, if you've got people out there spearing, now we go out and we catch a muskie, we unhook the fish, we release the fish, it swims. When they drop a spear, through its neck, it's a dead fish. Even if they miss and they graze it, the chances of delayed mortality are tremendous. So
Hmm.
all of a sudden, you've got, say 3 groups of Native Americans spearing on that lake, and let's say they do take 10 to 15, here and 10 to 15 there, they say, well, that's what we do. But that's what kills the lakes. So if there's one muskie per acre and they take 30, 40 fish out, that's 30, 40 fish less. Now, Arrowhead used to be a tremendous sleeper in Woodruff. Well, in 3 years, they took 103 muskies out of a 99-acre lake. How do you expect
tiny lake.
that?
Yeah.
99 acres. They took 103. How many do you think are left? So that's the things you're facing. Fishing pressure is another.
Mm-hmm.
I think muskie fishing is probably bigger than ever today. And then you've got a DNR. I can tell you for a fact they're not stocking the fish they used to. Back when Art Emke was in charge of the DNR, Art was putting muskies in puddles after it rained and building the muskie fishery up. Now it's changed. Now a lot of people today are pointing fingers at the DNR saying, well, they're ruining the muskie fishing. But the fact of it is, they're quick to blame the DNR, but really what it is the government in this state. They're the ones that dole out the money to the DNR. So when people get upset and because they're not stocking, they've got to answer to the politicians. If people really want to help the stocking effort, and they better, because right now we're fishing for muskies that were stocked 7 to 14 years ago. Now there has been a lull, and I can't even imagine to think where it's going to be, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And that's what's making it tougher for Gus and Taylor and everybody else. So you got to be on your toes, and you've got to be a lot more efficient on the water. I'm not trying to spell doom and gloom here, but it's a fact. And then people better start opening up their mouths. And I think these muskie clubs need to unite and get together and start squeaking a little bit, because we definitely need some oil in our, we need to get the muskie stocking back up where it needs to be. And again, you can complain and bitch at the DNR, but that's not the problem. I mean, it is part of it.
But they need the funding.
Thank you. They need the funding.
Yeah.
And the state has it. The state has it. There's a surplus.
It's a bummer because it's a state fish, It
is a state fish. And here's the thing. Years ago, Scott Walker signed off on a referendum for walleyes for tomorrow. And they're using the muskie ponds to raise walleyes because of walleyes for tomorrow. And that's fine. I don't blame them. They want more walleyes in the lake, but here's the problem. They're quick to blame the muskies. Oh, the muskies are eating all the walleyes. Study after study after study has proven that muskies, walleyes are very low, on what muskies eat. Less than 1%, they'll find walleyes in their belly. Actually, the real problem, especially on the Wisconsin River system, channel cats are the culprit of eating walleyes. But yet they don't talk about that. No kidding. They've had channel cats that they've pulled up out of fight nets with walleye tails sticking out of their mouth.
Golly, those crazy fish.
And then you've got fishing pressure there. What does a walleye fisherman normally do when it catches a walleye?
Eats it.
He thumps it and eats it. Well, I can tell you for a fact, when I was guiding, that there were guides that would come into a shop, would take 2 and 3 parties out a day, and they would keep their limits 2 and 3 times a day. How long do you think the population is going to last when you got walleye guides going out, taking 2 or 3 limits a day for their customers?
Yeah, it's not going to last a long time. And
that's what went on during my era. Yeah. So in the time I was guiding. So, that's why the walleyes are down. The walleye fishermen squeaked. They got more walleyes. And the muskie fishermen, all the clubs are going off in their own directions. And there's some clubs doing some great things. But these muskie clubs need to unite, and they need to get together, and they need to start questioning their politicians. Because if they don't, down the road, we're all going to be buying bowling balls, and that's going to be our new hobby.
Thank goodness
It's
I got a
not
bowling
a world
alley.
I want to live in.
Yeah, I'm not a
Oh,
bowler. Let me tell you,
I'm not
I know
either,
how to
but
throw gutter balls. So, you know what I mean? Again, I'm not trying to spell doom and gloom, but I think people, need to wake up. I'm all about helping, at the Wisconsin Musky Expo. First of all, people see us do that and they come to the show, but they don't realize that we give money to muskie clubs to help stock, towards their efforts of stocking muskies. We give the muskie clubs, we give clubs that I feel are doing something that's beneficial to the muskie fishery. We give them free booths so that they can talk about what they're doing and get more membership and raise more money so they can do more for muskie fishing. And we do more than just, have a bunch of people walking around. There's a lot of things that we get involved in, to help the muskie fishery. So there's a lot of aspects of the Wisconsin Musky Expo that people don't see.
yeah,
So, it's a good thing. It brings a lot of musky fishermen together. It's a lot of fun. Um, it's giving you guys platforms to, for yourself. And I want people to see you. I don't, I want people to see the people that are up and coming within the business.
for sure.
So,
And with that on the Wausau show or the Wisconsin Muskie Expo in Wausau, we could get into just as you're saying, up and coming guides. We got up and coming bait makers too. I know that
oh my
you
gosh.
said that we maybe want to touch on a few that maybe weren't talked about in some recent videos from Angling Anarchy and I
Well,
believe
sure.
Burnin' Eights.
When you do something like this and you understand, yeah, look, when I get messages from people and then the word gets out, hey, is Bam Bam coming to the Muskie Expo? Well, you're
Yep,
of the one question that everybody has asked, that has been the number one question.
I believe it.
There, there's a rumor that Bam Bam's coming to the Wisconsin Muskie Expo. Well, and that's why, he got brought up in those, Brian Scaife, Angling Anarchy, Burning Eights. We talked about Bam Bam coming. People know they get it, but at the same token here, I'll tell you what happened tonight. When I'm not fishing and I'm on the water, I wear do-rags. Okay. My heart beats twice as hard as a lot of people's because of my situation with my heart. Well, in hot weather, warmer weather, because my heart's beating so hard, I would wear do rags to keep the sweat out of my eyes. So,
Mm.
that people kind of noticed that, that I wore do rags. Well, one of the guys said to me tonight in a post, he said, his name was Vic. He said, "Where did you get those do rags? It's got a muskie on your, on your
That's
do
pretty
rag." And
sweet.
I said, the company that has that is called Bombcast Fishing. So when you come in, Bombcast is there. And if you look, there's a lot of people wearing those hats, they've got a little musky insignia in the corner. It's become a big thing. And so Bombcast Fishing is going to be there. He's going to be out in the hallway this year. His wife's pregnant. They're going to do their best to maybe handle one day, but normally they're on the main floor all 3 days of the show. But, because of their situation, they're going to be there for one day. And I said, we're going to put you out in the hallway. But, here's another bait that's, that hasn't really, well, it did get mentioned, but Conklin lures, they make the glitch and they make a pedigree. That's been a big thing. That's probably the second most question, about, them coming, and they have been mentioned in with, Brian Scaife, but they're going to be there. But, there's other companies. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Ridgeway Customs.
Oh yeah.
for sure.
Matt,
Yeah.
Ridgeway makes a
Mhm.
hell of a, minnow bait. And
Oh
I
yeah.
especially like it up for in timber. It's a good minnow bait to twitch up in the timber. It's good minnow bait anywhere. It's got great action. And the fish definitely love it. So, Ridgeway Customs is going to be there. We talked about bangers. Bangers are made by Hunsey Tail, which
Mhm.
has been a big bucktail over there. But here's another bait that a lot of people aren't aware of. lasso lures. Now you guys are younger, but in its day, there used to be a bait on the market called a slippery Sam,
Yeah, I've heard of that
and
one. I think. Yeah.
they caught a lot of fish and they worked well in high pressured water. Um, the man that made them, Don Pesca, passed away. And at the time, I think he was kind of getting ready to sell his company to Crash Mullins out of, Crash's Landing down in Cave Run.
Yeah.
I don't know if that took place, but Crash passed away as well of cancer. And Matt Blackburn, acquired everything, but he's making the Slippery Sam. So he's making his debut, at that show of the old Slippery Sams. And it is a great bait. And people, when it disappeared because Don passed away, it took a little bit, but he's going to be there this year. And I'm telling you, it was a very productive bait here in the Northwoods. And it put a lot of fish in the boat, not only up north, but everywhere that people used them. So it was a big bait during tournament fishing too. I don't know what it was, but Matt Lasso Lures is building the bait even probably a little better than the way Don was putting them together. And they're good quality baits, so he'll be there as well. Zilla Baits, you've heard of Zilla's custom baits?
Yeah.
He's going to be there. There is a company that's going to be there. It's the company's from Poland, and it's called Graphs, and they manufacture some really high-end rain suits. And I think, especially with musky fishermen, rain suits, cold weather gear, and fishing line are probably the three things that musky fishermen don't really pay attention much to. They'll spend $400 on a reel, $350 to $400 on a rod, and they'll sit there and they'll look for a deal on social media to buy their braid as cheap as they can.
Yeah.
That perplexes me to this day.
That's always
So,
hilarious.
You can throw the best lure in the world, but if your line breaks, you're not.
The only terminal connection you got between you and that fish.
Yeah,
Come on,
that
guys.
lure's gone. Yeah.
I agree with the rain suit stuff too. I mean, that's such an under, kind of like viewed thing, and just having like good clothing is just such a difference maker. Because if you're out on the water for 8 to 14 hours, like you're going to be way more efficient when you're in better, comfortable gear. It's just a fact.
My wife gave me hell about buying some quality rain gear. And, she's a good steward of the checkbook, but when it comes to musky fishing, it's wide open to me, but no, seriously, I bought her some really good rain gear. She thought I was out of my mind, but we were out fishing last year in some weather that, she found out what good rain, what good rain gear feels like. And now even though she doesn't like the price, but she understood the difference between the cheap rain gear, the $40, $50, $60, $100 rain gear versus a rain suit that cost a few $100. This Graphs, it is phenomenal stuff. And I'm telling you right now, I've got probably two sets of rain gear around here. I'm going to definitely buy a third from them when they're there, but they're from Poland. I got a pair of boots from them at the ice fishing show this year. And those things, you pick them up, they're rated for 50 below zero. You pick them up, there's nothing to them. They don't weigh nothing, but I'm going to tell you what, in cold weather, not that we had a perfect testing ground this year. I've never seen a winter like this. They're great boots. So I got a pair of those. I'm going to get another, another rain, suit, because in my case, because of my heart issues and on blood thinners, I'm telling you what, I can be on the water 6 hours and nasty weather can demoralize you.
Oh yeah.
It can kill you,
I remember, Gus, that if you remember the second day in Madison of the PMTT last year, it was just miserable out there. And I packed in a hurry, and I think I had glanced at the weather, and it was like 85 and sunny on that Saturday. And I saw there was some rain in the forecast for Sunday, but I remember I was not, if you remember right, Gus, I was not well equipped, and it was miserable. I was freezing, and it definitely affected my mental state that day. I just the whole
Sure it
time I was
does.
thinking about how soaked my feet were, and I was chilled to the bone. It was tough, but yeah, I mean,
So,
having good gear is just it's tough to put a
so
price
can
on.
you imagine getting older and in your 60s what it does to you?
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
telling
I'm
you.
creeping up on 30 and I'm already complaining about it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, rain gear is really important. So definitely stop by their booth. I know I'm going to buy another after buying the boots at the ice show. I'm going to buy a new set of rain gear from them. It's good quality stuff. It's not cheap, but I could care less. There's a lot of good outfits up there, but the fact that they're at the show, I'm going to patronize the people that are at the show. Let me ask you this, Gus. Do you younger guys use crane baits much anymore?
Yeah, you're Max and I love to use them. I actually upped
That's
my
awesome.
arsenal by like probably 4 times the amount we had the other year. Just kind of upped on colors of the same sizes that we liked, and we're really kind of getting into the crankbait game. I think that's one part that we want to really focus on pretty
Crane
much
baits, I'll tell you, have been
years down
around
and out.
forever,
they're
Hmm.
awesome.
and yet nobody seems to know about crane baits. But there's going to be two booths there. Uh, the people that own crane baits, they're made in West Virginia.
Hmm.
They still catch a lot of big fish. The boys at Burning Eights, they've done very well with crane baits, and yet which surprised me because they're younger guys to me. Okay, you guys are younger guys, but crane baits are what I would call a guide bait. It's a bait that you can't fish wrong, and they just catch fish. And
Right.
Straight up.
so they're going to be at the show, which you don't see very often. J&T's is going to have a full round of crane baits. Burning Eights has got some custom colors.
Nice.
So they'll be their big game. A lot of guys are, Bill and Sharon Crane are getting older and older, and I think Bill is now 86 years old. Sharon, is up there as well. I don't know how much longer they're going to make crane baits, but then you got Big Game. Big Game makes a balsa bait. That's a great bait. We caught a lot of fish on him, and he's got a minnow bait out there that's virtually indestructible, and yeah, but people don't hear about those baits very often because depending on who's writing the Muskie article in these magazines are talking
Hmm.
about it and how many baits the guys receive determines whether they're going to talk about you or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
that's something
That's
we're
a
trying
whole
to
thing.
highlight. We're trying to highlight some of that on our socials, just kind of talking about all different baits that we use, and we've highlighted the crane bait. I mean, we have a few big game crankbaits as well. One in particular that was like on fire 2 years ago, Gus. If you remember, it was like that all
Hmm.
brown one that just felt like it was the only bait in the whole box that was going to catch a fish for like a week or two there. But yeah, those balsa crankbaits are, I mean, they are fish catchers. That there's no doubt about it. They just have such a unique style to them, and
you're right.
um, they
And they stay up really
yeah
nicely.
they fish really well in our part of the world. I mean, I just feel like they were almost built for like northern Wisconsin in a way.
They were. I've been using them for 45 years, and I've had a lot of customers catch a lot of fish on crane baits of all sizes.
Mhm.
Yes, they do get destroyed, but that's part of musky fishermen fishing. It amazes me how a
Mhm.
lot of guys, they'll bust up, they'll catch a big fish. I know this was a story we were talking about the other night. I was by Big Game. Big Game is also has two tamer rods as well as Dreamcatcher bucktails. And he was talking about, I was looking at one of the baits that got returned. The guy caught a 52 incher. He
Oh,
netted the fish. The fish went nuts, ballistic. Now, think about this, a 52-inch fish, 35-pound fish as an average, starts thrashing in the net. The guy allowed the fish to thrash, so it ripped part of the wire out of the body, out of a balsa body, and then sent the bait back and complained to Big Game and said, well, this bait broke. Welcome to musky fishing. That's what happened.
For the fish that size, I'd be putting that bait up on the wall with pride and hanging it up with the fish picture or the mount or something,
Well, yeah, but
That's what
he
I would
he
be doing. Yeah.
he sent the bait to big game and complained.
Yeah. That's wild.
Crazy.
I mean, my wife is sitting over here to the side, she's the one, the computer savvy, and she's pointing, and shaking her head by what you said. I mean, she understands. You understand, my wife, Penny, you know what? You want to talk about a musky fool. That woman, she set the hook on a fish one time. We were out fishing on the Turtle Flambeau. She sets the hook on a fish. The blank was a prototype blank, okay? And the rod blew up on her. And so what does Penny do? Penny has got the handle with the reel in her hand. She looks and she takes and throws the rod down and grabs the braid and starts hand lining the fish. And I would try to, don't do that. And she did it anyways. I scooped the fish as fast as I could. Well, in the end result, we got the fish in the net. Her hands are bleeding, and she's got all these cuts. And I looked at her, I said, Penny, do you want to go to the doctor? Do you want to go to the hospital? Those are pretty bad. And she looks at it. I wrapped a towel around her hands and she looks at it and she goes, nah. She says, they're war wounds. She goes, I love them. She said, let's just stop the bleeding and let's keep fishing. So that was her. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, how many?
Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, she's a warrior. I'm telling you, she loves the musky fish. She loves the passion. This woman carries a musky tattoo on her left leg. Everybody at Wisconsin Musky Expo, stop her. She'll show you, and check out the musky tattoo on her leg.
Awesome.
But no, she loves it.
That's the right mentality right there. That's for sure. She
does. So, but it was just funny. Oh, they're war wounds. It's okay. Let's keep going. Her hands hurt that night, though. Boy, did she hurt that night.
Oh, I bet. Ooh. Yeah. I mean, those things, like over the course of your, time musky fishing, though, shit like that just happens, right? Like, we've had a few instances on the boat. Always good to keep a good first aid kit on the boat. That's for damn sure. I mean, because these animals are unpredictable, and you never know when you're going to have to either hand line one or, you accidentally get your finger stuck in one's tooth like I did one year and unzips you. So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen when you're out on the water, but that's what makes it fun, right?
Well, when you're on the water every day, things, the odds are going to be greater. I had a guy hit me in the face with a suic one time. I mean, it's covered right here, but you can still see the scar. And he was a sidewinder. He hit me in the face. It went all the way through my gums. It went all the way through my lip into my gums. And that was a treat to go to the hospital with that one. I've been drilled in the back a couple times, in the head, underneath my nail. Yeah. We've had it all. I mean, it's been, we've had our share of injuries on the water,
I remember when I was a little kid, we still were at our cabin on Cranberry Lake on the Eagle River chain. And I got a hook so far into one of my thumbs, I had to go to the hospital to get it out. And when I went there, the nurse was telling me a story about a guy who had come in there a day or two prior that had a musky lure stuck to his hand that was stuck to his face. And what happened was he was trying to land the fish. And, I was only like 10 or 11. I mean, I was young, maybe 12, 13 or whatever at the time. So I didn't fully understand, everything that goes into putting your boat in the water, all this stuff. Right. And so she tells me that the guy went to land the fish or something and the bait popped and it hit him in the face and he reacted and went to grab his face and then jerked and the hook got stuck in his hand, got stuck in his face. Well, he wasn't, a resident on the lake. He had launched his boat that day. He is by himself. So he, drove back to the landing, had to launch his boat with all this, drive himself to the hospital and get everything fixed up. And now that I'm older, I'm thinking to myself, like, what a shit show that had to have been. I mean, not only do you lose the fish, but now you got a musky bait stuck in your face. And it's just part of the game.
Listen, I had a guy that set a suic on the chair. I mean, let me tell you, suics hook more than just muskies. They hook a lot of people too. And I'm going to tell you, this guy set it down on the chair. He changed baits. And he turns around and I told him we're going to move. He plops his ass down on the chair. Guess what? He's got treble hooks on both cheeks. So I had to call some guys to the boat landing to help get the guy out of the boat and then put him in the truck. At the time, it wasn't funny, but once we got there, I could hear the nurses in the background in the room laughing their asses off because they had to cut his pants, out, to get in there to be able to get the hooks out and give him shots and get the hooks out. Let me tell you something. Boy, he never lived that down.
How was the car ride? How did he just hover the whole time? Yeah. Every bump that you went over is like the hooks are just going in further and further.
Oh yeah, he was whimpering like a baby. I'm telling you, and I could understand that. I just told him, don't worry about it. It's just fat back there. It ain't gonna hurt you none. And, I mean,
outside of the obvious answer, getting hooked in the ass would probably be the second worst place to get hooked.
It was crazy. I was concerned about it. I had a lot of thoughts going through my head, but you know what? We got through it, and then it was funny. I mean, even he had a good laugh at it. You know what I mean? So, there are a lot of experiences through the years, guiding and doing everything. That's probably, I will tell you something, Gus, that's going to happen for you, I think, is, you're going to, how old are you, Gus?
I'm 25.
How old are you? You're 25. I'm going to tell you, when you're 50 years old, you're still doing this. You're going to look back at all the experiences that you're going to have at this. And I can tell you something right now is you live life. This is what you want to do. This is who you're going to be. You live life the way you want to live it. When I look at my age now, there are some regrets, but when you look at the overall picture, I wouldn't trade it for nothing because I've gotten to do so much and fish in so many places and experience so many people. A lot of good, some bad. In any business, there's assholes in any business, okay? We see the keyboard warriors out here on Facebook, and they have all the answers. I mean, nobody's got all the answers. I mean, I'm in my 60s. I'm quick. I believe me. You got something to say, Gus? I'm going to listen, and I'm going to decipher what you got going on, because if it puts a few more fish in the boat, I'm all about it. It's, some of these guys that are on Facebook and they know it all. I don't have the time or day for that stuff, and I shut them down right away, but no, a lot of good experiences as far as being a fishing guide. The show has been quite an experience in the last 15 years. We've got kids that started working at that show when they were, they were in school, in high school. And, today all those kids have got a job, they're, in fields where, they're, I don't know what, they've got professional jobs, but yet every year they take that time and come back to that show every year because that show was a big part of their life. And that's the one thing, when you go to the Wisconsin Musky Expo, that you can sense everybody, the vendors, the people, everybody's got a smile on their face. There are people that are trying to help others. We just don't put up with any politics and bad blood. And you can see the difference at that show. And we want to keep that atmosphere. So it's a good show. I'm proud of what it's become. Gus, you've been there. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite show for sure. I mean, it's got all the things that you want in a muskie event. That it's got all the speakers, like you said. It's got a lot of local guides, which I think is good. A show that caters to more the northern half, a little easier travel of the state of Wisconsin, and obviously brings in more than just Wisconsin, as we talked about Brady coming all the way from Western Pennsylvania, grain baits showing up from West Virginia. We got gear from Poland. So it's a lot more than just central Wisconsin. And I think that's really cool. And I'm excited to be a little more a part of it this year. I've usually just been a walker at the show, just walking around, a sightseer as you say, but I really enjoy it. I'm really looking forward to it, and I like the timing of it. It's the last one. It's that much closer to muskie season. I think that's what gets people the most fired up. And I don't know who told me this as well, or where I saw this, but I'm not taking credit, but somebody was saying that it's also filled with a lot of very, very knowledgeable people at that show. You could just walk to the next person and just say, hey, and then start chatting muskies, and all of a sudden maybe they fish the same waters, and you can just learn so much from just talking to people. I think it was last week, Taps and Tackle we were talking about. Yeah, now it just came to my mind. I think that's a
Just
really cool
said it's
thing
a
about
show
that show.
show filled with sticks. Like everyone there really knows their stuff, and it makes it
Hmm.
a very well informed show, which I think is great. It's probably great for the local bait makers. They're probably getting amazing feedback, from these anglers. And like Gus was saying, I mean, anytime you can start to bounce ideas off of people that have fished similar waters to you, I mean, there's no easier way to talk to somebody for way too long than to start talking about, experiences you have on similar lakes or what have you. I mean, it just feels like it's a very, it's always just a very fun conversation. I mean, talking muskies is fun, but then you get more specific and you start talking about waters that you grew up on, or you fished a lot, or you're talking to somebody like like yourself who's fished these waters for years, learned from guys like Rizzo. I mean, that's to young guys like us, that's invaluable information that the only way we're going to get it is by striking up that conversation. So I think
Sure.
that's what's really cool about it.
Well, I think the people are very open. It's amazing at this time of year. I get very busy with what do you call, messenger chats and text from people, and I answer them. I do my best to answer every one of them. And at this time of year, it's pretty heavy. My wife can tell you yesterday in the morning, I was on the phone from 8 o'clock in the morning till I think 1:30 in the afternoon, answering messages, talking to people, because the show is right around the corner. Gus, you had mentioned about, the people, you guys are talking about the people. If you look at our speakers, and again, I'm sure a lot of people have seen the videos of, Angling Anarchy with Brian Scaife, and they've seen Ross Provost with the Burning Eights. When you look at our speakers, you've got Taylor that's opening up the show on
Hmm.
Friday, and then you've got Michael Hansen, both young guys that I really respect and can see their future in this. But then, the last seminar of the day of Friday would be, I'm sure you all know who Brian Schaefer is. And,
Of course,
he's
yeah.
not really old, but let me tell you what, he's a badass when he gets on the water.
Oh yeah.
That man doesn't stop for nothing. And he's
We
put a
just
lot
had
of
him
good fish.
on. We just had him on a podcast a few weeks ago, and it was, I mean, lot of people tuned into that one, and I think for good reason.
He's
He's
awesome.
yeah,
I consider Brian one of the best musky sticks in the state of Wisconsin, and he's going to be, of course, they're going to do a duel. Then you got Dan, Groping Geezer, and Dan, is like Brian. A lot of people may not hear his name as much, but let me tell you, he's very good at what he does. He's just, he's even quieter than Brian, and he goes about his business and takes care of things. Same thing on Saturday. I've got a gentleman speaking first thing out of the gates, Tom Harrison. Now, young guy says, Tom Harrison, who's that? That old man, that 71-year-old man, has probably caught more 50-inch muskies, inland water muskie fishing, 50-inch muskies than I think even Tony Rizzo has. Tony's caught a lot of big fish, but this man's caught a lot of 50-inch fish. And I think his biggest is a 54 and a half that was pushing 40 pounds. I think in one season he got 6 over 50 in one season. That's pretty
Oh my
tremendous.
God.
That's real deal. I mean, I've seen the pictures. I can just tell you this. He also makes his own baits. He was at the show last year. He's going to be at the show this year, but he's 71. He's getting tired. And I don't know how many years he can keep coming to the show. But I can just tell you something right now. Something big is going to be in Tom's Custom Muskie Baits booth this year. So everybody needs to stop by in his booth. I'm telling you, something big.
okay.
And I'll
All
just
right.
leave you with that.
That's a good
Um,
little teaser there.
Cliffhanger
yep,
there. I
yep.
like it.
Not gonna say what it is. I just gotta tell you, it's definitely big. Okay. So after Tom, then of course I'm gonna speak, and I'll be honest with you. I look at a guy like you, Gus, and it's your time. And I think this year is going to be the last year I'm going to speak at the show. Still going to do seminars at clubs, but when you're running a show and then trying to do a seminar and help everybody, it's hard. It's very hard, on me. It wears me out. When you get up there, you have a lot of passion trying to help people. So at noon, I'm going to speak, and I think that it's time to move over and let Gus come in and light some fireworks on some people. And so that'll be at noon, and then at 2 o'clock, we've got a guy that nobody knows, but should. His name is Dave Birch, and you guys watched some of the videos. People know he's the man that basically developed Super Braid. This is where Super Braid came from. Before
No
Super Braid,
kidding.
we fished with Dacron, and that was made out of cloth and silk. This is the man that started the Super Braid craze. This is the man that set the standard. And like we said before, that's the only terminal connection you got between you and that fish. It's a seminar you definitely want to listen to and learn something about your fishing line, and so that you know what you're fishing with. So that's at 2 o'clock. 4 o'clock is Steve Jonasy. I don't know if you boys know who Steve is, but
Yep.
he's the granddaddy of the boys over in Iowa. He's caught a lot of big fish. He used to guide Minnesota. Uh, Steve's been around forever. I remember when he first came into this business, and he's still here. So he'll be speaking at 4 o'clock. It's definitely a guy you want to meet up with and go fishing with earlier before the season opens in Wisconsin. Sunday's going to be pretty easy. We got Jeff Van Remortel. He needs no introduction. He's pretty well respected musky guide, in northern Wisconsin. He's a hell of a stick. And then, of course, the last guy is Mike Keys. And as I said, Mike and I are basically the same age. Mike's a very good musky fisherman. His comment to a lot of people is that he makes video TV shows for entertainment, but Mike can he can stand out there and fish however long it takes to put some fish in the boat. He's a very good stick. I've known Mike a very, very long time. I filmed with Mike 15 years ago, when he was getting started, and he's still there today. When you look at all the other muskie shows out there, he's still there, and the rest of them I think are gone pretty much.
Yeah, his body of work is
the best.
outstanding. I mean, I like on any given night, I'll just throw on a shuffle playlist at YouTube of Keys Outdoors videos and just watch. And most of them I've seen 2 or 3 times already, but they're always just amazing. I mean, he's just great.
Yeah, he does a good job. So, those are the speakers for, this year. I've already got speakers lined up for 2025. So that's been taken care of and we've got basically, I think, Mike gave me a final count the other day. We've got 92 vendors in the show.
Wow.
It's the most we've ever had.
Wow.
I don't want it to get any bigger.
Awesome.
That's plenty. But
I think
there's plenty to
perfect.
see.
Yeah. I like the size of the show. I've always enjoyed it. It's always, from when I've been going, it's always been at the same place. Has it always been at that?
Always from day one.
Always? Okay.
Day one. Always. I haven't moved it. The people that we work with there at the show, they're great people that run the building. And I enjoy working with them, and they take very good care of us. And we're just going to keep it there. I mean, it's a perfect location. I mean, we've got people that come from Minnesota, the UP, all over the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. We've got people that come from central Illinois. I talked to a gentleman tonight who is coming from Pennsylvania. We're not talking about Brady, Brady. We're talking about the man's coming to the show from Pennsylvania.
That's unbelievable. That's awesome. That's
We've
really
got people
cool.
who come from California. It's
Mhm.
unbelievable. There's a couple that come in from California every year to come to the show. They fly from
Yeah.
California to come to the show every year.
That's
There's
So
no muskies in California.
no, but he spends his whole summer here fishing all summer,
Oh,
and then he
okay.
goes back during the winter months in California. But that's why he comes out. But no,
Oh,
it's
nice.
the show is. I've watched how it's evolved. We do care. We're very careful on vendors that we bring into the show. We've got good quality vendors. We've got all those cottage companies, but we also have, we got the Team Rhinos. We've got Musky Innovations. Musky Innovations came out with that new quad dog this year. That's been getting around. You've got the old timers like Suick and Bobby Baits still there. You've got
Yep.
Crane Baits. So there's a nice mixture of everything, that's coming to the show. So, I think this year I'm excited because I feel it's probably the best show that we've done. So I'm pretty fired up about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I really am fired up about it. I don't think we could do the show better, than what we've done this year. So I'm pretty excited to get there. Next Monday, I'm going to be speaking at Bill's Muskie Club in Wausau, and then I've got a day of that I can just sit back and relax. Wednesday, I'm going to be speaking at Titletown in Green Bay. Then I'm going to come back the same night, and setup begins on Thursday. I think you're going to be down there. I think. Are you working the Titletown booth, Gus, or there's something you got going on with them?
No, not the title town. I'm gonna be in the Hunsey Tales booth with Kyle
I got you.
Hunsader and our good friend Nick Amrose with his crankbaits and other very like diving
Okay.
rides and glide baits too. So
Okay. All right. Are you going to have some Muskies on tap sweatshirts there?
if there's any left, there'll be some sweatshirts, but there's for sure gonna be a whole bunch of hats and stickers to give out.
I got to ask you, how did you come up with the name Muskies on Tap?
Um, that's a good question. Max, when did that get developed? That was about a year ago now. Probably March,
Yeah.
April of last year.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Trying to
it's kind of
blend.
it's a little fuzzy now. I mean, I think it started when, we kind of came up with an idea to do. I mean, this whole podcast thing has kind of evolved into something we weren't really like. The original goal of it wasn't to do what we're doing now. So like, I think that in itself is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But when we came up with the idea, like I love talking muskies. I love, just chatting with Gus like all the time. Even when I'm at work on a Tuesday, like I'm always curious as to what Gus is doing on the water. And I'm sure a lot of people, that work corporate jobs like myself or whatever that aren't able to fish every day, want to be, listening or, involved in some way with muskie fishing. You know how it is. Once you get the bug, you just kind of have it and it
Sure.
consumes you a little bit. And so, when we were talking about doing it, I was like, man, it would be fun to kind of promote your guide business by doing like some weekly, kind of updates, a live looking in what you're doing, what you're having success with might help kind of gain some traction with people and whatever, get your name out there a bit. And, I think at the time we wanted it to be like a separate entity from just specifically the guide business. So we were just throwing out random names. I mean, I think we literally were like, no idea is a bad idea in our group text. We have another guy that typically does it with us who wasn't able to make the interview tonight, but we just have a texting thread that we're always talking about musky fishing on. And I think we just started throwing out random names. And, I think that one kind of was in our top 5 rotation. The more we kept saying it, we're like, oh, it's kind of catchy. We could do a cool logo with it. And I had a friend that kind of helped out drawing up a graphic design of it. And once I saw the design, I was like, okay, this is pretty sweet. Like I would, if I saw this logo somewhere, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. There's, anytime you can, I guess, mix, like we talked about this with Taps and Tackle last week. We had them on, like, beer drinking, musky fishing can go hand in hand at
It
times.
fits
And
right in. That's why I asked.
so
Well, listen, most people that were talking back in my days were sitting at a bar. Let me tell you,
right.
when
Yeah.
you would go to a bar up north, there were more muskies caught in the bar, than there was in the lake. because they all sitting around and, they would be talking and the bartender just walk over to the tap, pour themselves, pour another beer, put them in, and nobody questioned. At the end of the night, the guy had a $50 beer tab, drinking tab, and they would just pay it. And like I said, that's why I kind of wondered where, it came from. It's a lot of conversation. I think it's the same today, but I think social media has taken it to a different level. Like we're all sitting, I'm looking at this camera right now going, holy crap, I'm sitting on here right now looking at this thing. We'd sit at a bar and talk, and now we're sitting on a computer, talking with each other. And you're in Eagle River. I'm right now, in Wisconsin Rapids. And, Matt, where are you living?
I'm in Minneapolis.
You're in Minneapolis. I'm sorry for you. I don't know what you're doing there.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer I'll last here, but for the time being, it works out. Yeah, I still make it up to Eagle River. I mean, I'm damn near up there 80% of the summer, so and into the fall. And so with it being still a little farther away, it's tough, but it works for now, and we'll see how long that lasts. But
we were talking about the Muskie show, but this is something, listen, just for the people, because like I said, there's been so much out there, and I appreciate everybody in the social media, pitching in and letting, the world know about the Muskie show. But for the people, it's March 15th through the 17th. The doors open up at 2:00 on Friday afternoon. I hope everybody can come join us. We love seeing the people come down. Some of the guys were talking today. Penny has two holidays. My wife, she loves Christmas and she loves the week of the Wisconsin Musky Expo, and she celebrates both of them as equal. And so she's real happy. I think if it wasn't for the fact that she loved the Musky show so much, I don't know if I'd keep doing it, because there's so much work, so much detail that's involved. And it's not what people think. There's a lot of detail and a lot of work and a lot of hours, and it's just, but when we get there, I walk in there on Saturday morning, Friday's a blur. We got 400 people lined up every year. They start lining up at 10:30 in the morning. And it keeps, there's times we'll go out to McDonald's and bring everybody cheeseburgers in that have been sitting there since 10:30. And, and we got water. And matter of fact, I was going to tell you, everybody, the first 100 people that come into the show on Friday, they get a muskie bait. They get a muskie bait.
That's awesome.
This year they're going to get creepers. So they're going to get some jitter critters.
Really
Most
cool.
people don't even know what those are, but they're going to get a jitter critter. So they can come on down and, hopefully they'll get there in time to get one. But in all, there's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lure swap going on Saturday night. Wausau area Muskies Inc. puts that on. It keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. So that's another thing that goes on there. It's just keeps growing and keeps growing. But, I look at this computer and I'm sitting here talking to you guys on this computer. And like I said, I think a lot of people get their information from this. Back when I was younger, when we, nobody's got all the answers. I mean, nobody's ever talked to a muskie, except a mounted fish, in the bar, and they're usually cussing them, But, the thing of it is, when we were looking for answers, we actually went and found the answers. For instance, like we always questioned why certain baits would catch fish and other baits wouldn't. It's been an ongoing thing. And I think after 55 years, I've run across a couple things, but, talking about that, we actually got our hands on high frequency sound equipment, sunk 8 microphones in a swimming pool, and actually recorded the sounds of what these baits put out. Or in another case, we talked about color, what do the fish see? Well, there was a gentleman who used to work for the Marshfield Clinic, and he was in charge of the optometry department, and we used to give him sets of musky eyes. And he basically came back and gave us, basically a lowdown of what he learned through, computers. And
Do you remember any of the results from that study?
yeah, I
No.
do. Yeah. You know what? I've gone through a few heart attacks and a couple of open heart surgeries, but they're just some things that don't escape your mind or don't leave. I will tell you this. First of all, he had 49 sets of eyes. And those fish came from Big Arborvita, Buckataben, came from the Eagle River chain, Chippewa flowage, various body of waters like Vieux des Irs. Back in those days, somebody would catch a big fish. They want to mount the fish. Well, we take the eyes and give them, to that optometrist.
Yeah.
And, basically out of 49 sets. Now, I'm not saying this is hardcore science on his part, but every set of those eyes, those fish were nearsighted. Every set. They were all nearsighted.
Wow.
So the second thing that he passed on to me was the two colors that muskies saw. They have rods and cones just like we do. He can see if whether it's you or a fish or an animal, he can tell whether they're colorblind, or he can see what colors that they can see the best. And the two colors they see the best was fluorescent green and fluorescent orange.
No kidding.
No kidding. Fluorescent green. So if you look at my box, that's what a lot of my colors, that in walleye, browns and yellows were pretty, strong. But when you look at, say like, blade colors, bucktail, blades, nickel showed up very well in overcast conditions. Copper was the most visible of all blade colors. So when you look at my box, there's a lot of copper in my box, especially because I fish dark water for the most of the time, So those, really stood out. But then again, in painted blades, I use a lot of oranges because that's what they see. Sound is definitely, like I said, a factor. You could have two baits, say in this case, there was two tallywhackers. You all know what a tallywhacker is, right?
Yep.
Gooch's tallywhacker.
Mm-hmm.
Got two black and orange tallywhackers. One caught fish like it was unbelievable. The other tallywhacker never caught a fish. The difference was the wood in the tallywhacker that we never caught a fish on, the wood was very buoyant. So therefore, even though the tail would spin coming through the water, the bait rode really high in the water. So therefore, it didn't make the same sound as the other whacker because the other whacker was really dense. So therefore, the head got down into the water pushed over the back against the tail, and therefore had a deeper sound, a multiple, low frequency, mid to low frequency sound, and that bait caught a lot of fish. So, the things that we learned, from things like that, it basically is how I pick and choose my baits today.
That's
That's
a lot to process there, right? I'm trying to think.
Well, I guess I would have to ask then. I mean, that's really awesome to hear. I'm thinking of a one specific topwater bait that just did so well for us for a very long time, and it unfortunately broke because it caught too many fish, and we tried to replicate it and buy a new one, and it just doesn't. It does. I can tell it does not sound the same, and it has not produced for us. Which is funny. Same bait company, same bait, everything like that.
Is it wood?
Yeah, wood bait.
Well, wood is not, Mother Nature makes the wood. So if it comes from the outer tree, it's buoyant. It's going to be very buoyant as opposed to the center that's going to be dense. So you're exactly right. So when you look at some of the tail baits on the market today, and now they've changed again, there's been different levels of tail baits, but we used to take lead, and normally when we started with tallywhackers to make them work right, we would put roughly right around 3/16 to a quarter ounce of lead in the head, back the hooks up so we could always make our whackers sound like, the whackers that caught fish. And of course, the evolution of that, as time went on, top kicks. You guys probably are not familiar with top kicks. Smitty bait still makes the top kick to this day, but there's lead in the belly. And that all came from what we learned with tallywhackers. I worked with Dick Grice Tackle. We put lead in the belly, and that's how we got every one of those baits to work. The head was scooped out, water came over the back, pushed on the tail. There was a tremendous amount of fish caught on that top kick. And yet today, the younger people don't even know what a top kick is. So that's what I'm saying. There's,
Right.
What's with I guess just sticking on to topwater, since Max and I don't use them a ton, but when we do, we enjoy using them with prop baits. Are you saying if you want one riding a little bit lower, are you almost preferring one that makes a lower plopping noise than a higher
mid to low
plop, or is
frequency sound?
mid to low? Okay, because I know there's a few out there that make really, really fast plopping. I think it's like the little bastard from Lake X. We don't have one, but
Lake X makes some great baits.
oh, they do. We love with the fat bastard is
Yeah.
phenomenal. But I just noticed in videos that makes such a high plop, and I always wonder why that maybe would catch a fish over. Maybe it's the size profile or
It's,
what.
you know what, Gus, sometime this summer, you and I need to get on the water so I can show you
Mhm.
some of the things of what I'm saying. But, Lake X makes a really good top water bait.
Mhm.
Do you ever throw regular toppers? Like say toppers with Delta blades on it, like a topper stopper.
Not since I went bass fishing. Bass fishing is when I
Okay.
used them. I don't have a musky one.
Okay. Tell you what, if you, let's say, when you're at the show, whether
Mhm.
it's a topper stopper, whether TR, TR's baits, they've got brass. But if you were to take a topper, with Delta blades, which is buzz blades front and back, I can show you where we can go on the water. You can take the bait out of the package. You're going to cast it, and it's going to have a certain sound. When I get
Mhm.
done tuning that bait, you're going to be amazed at the difference between the two sounds. It's the
Mhm.
same thing with, with tail baits. The same thing with tail baits, bucktails. What we're going to try to do is I'm going to get you one of our ambushes, and I'm going to let you put that in the water, and I think you're
Mhm.
going to be amazed how that thing, the sound that bait makes, and you can actually feel it, and you can actually hear it when it comes back to the boat. Think
That's the
about what I
big
just told you. We're talking a
that's the
bucktail.
that's the big willow bladed one, right?
Nope, it's got a
Or
big
no,
old
what's
mag.
the
It's got a number 9. It's
Oh,
got a
that's
number
the
9.
big Colorado one. Yeah,
Yeah, it's,
I
if you go to
gotcha.
Big Guy Baits, he's got them
Mhm.
there. They're called ambushes. But you're talking
Mhm.
about, Rocky Point. Rocky
Oh,
Point's willow.
sure.
If you listen to their sound coming through the water, here's a great example tonight. If even if you got your phone right there, if you go onto my page and you scroll down on the Facebook page, there's a bait on there called a counterpunch. And you can actually hear that bait coming through the water. It's extremely loud. But when you look at the bait, in the bait that I'm talking about, it's made by Rusty's Custom, musky lures or lures, Rusty Custom Lures. It's called, it's got blades on it and it's coming through, and you think, what is this bait doing? You go to my page and listen to that, and that tells the story. Sound and vibration is key factor. And here's the point I'm getting to, I think, with the younger guys. You know, when I was younger, your age, muskie followed. Muskies have always followed. Muskies follow today. And I really honestly believe the reason muskies follow your baits is because the baits aren't in the strike zone that coordinates with the mood or the activity level those fish are in. So if
Mhm.
the fish are either going to be active, neutral, or inactive. That's all they know. They're a creature, of instinct. And so let's say if a muskie is active, depending on the waters that you're fishing, those fish, their strike zone could be anywhere from 6 to 10 feet, depending on the clarity of the water. So before that happens, the fish have got to be able to, they got to be able to feel the vibration on their lateral line. They've got to be able to hear it through their inner ear. In order to do so, that bait's got to be making some kind of sound coming through the water. Even with a glider or a jerk bait, as the bait is twisting, those hooks are banging onto that body and it's making sound underwater. That counter punch, you can hear the sound, the scratching sound that the bait has coming through the water. Bucktails. I used to be one of the owners of Musky Buster Lures, and our bucktail was flared. If you can get me one of those Musky Busters, I can show this to you, Penny. It's out there hanging out there on those pans out there. I'm going to show you a bucktail that you probably are not even aware of. And this is a bait that we used to make, but it had a very wide flare like a hula skirt. And the purpose of that was when a blade revolves around, it's pushing against the mass. So that blade has got to push the water over that mass. Well, some of that water is going to bounce back into that blade. Therefore, this is exactly the bait right here. This is a Musky Buster. Okay, this is a bait we used to make. And if you look at the bucktail, it's you see the flare on it.
Yeah.
You see that flare?
Very wide.
If you look, right, we got a flat weight in the rear end that basically pushes the hair up. Well, when that is coming through the water, that blade is revolving around and it's got to fight to push the water over that bait. So some of that water bounces back. This thing literally in sound test growled. And back in its day, when we were making these and we were at our best, you would be amazed at all the 35-pound plus fish that were caught on the Wisconsin river system with this bait. Not only there, but all over Vilas Oneida County, we used to sell thousands of these things. So, that was a bait that we used to make, and, my wife's pointing and telling me to go up here to this is where the camera's at. This one's kind of fluffed down. The only reason I've got that, there was a gentleman knew that of me being involved with this company, and he brought him over to my house. And it's kind of cool when you start to look at, old baits that we used to have, and that's the kind of stuff you don't see anymore. You just don't see it anymore. And, but there was a basis to it. And we learned that through high frequency sound equipment. There's some bucktails that people
really
throw to this day that are still on the market and they don't really make any sound at all.
That's unbelievable.
So, and it's not to put anybody down or to, badmouth another company. If you notice, I haven't said the name of any companies, but there are just some baits on the market that are better than others. And so in the case of the show, I'm going to tell you, there's some really good companies on that floor,
So are there any specific baits that are going to be at the show that you're looking forward to kind of using here in this upcoming year that you haven't in the past? Or I guess even not even that. I mean, just baits that, you've been kind of keeping your eye on or that worked well for you last year that, you're going to continue to throw this year.
Well, I'll tell you this, I'm pretty fortunate. I've been doing this for so long. I mean, I've been in the musky tackle business or industry for 46 years. So my specialty in the industry at the time was musky rods or fishing rods in general. So, I used to work for Lamiglass. I worked for Lamiglass 11 years. I've worked with Loomis Composites before it became G Loomis. And then I started, subcontracting, actually working and designing rods for various companies on the market. My name wasn't necessarily attached to it. I stayed in the back seat, which was fine, but I helped those companies, work on certain rods. Anyways, like I said, it was a different world back then. So when we wanted to find answers, we were able to get our hands on high frequency sound equipment. We were able to learn stuff like from Gerald Buchholz and the things that he learned from dissecting musky's eyes. If you were to talk to fishermen today and you mentioned that, they would just shred you on Facebook because you you gouge the muskie's eyeballs out of their head. But if the fish was going to be kept and mounted, or I mean, he just didn't get eyes from me. He got eyes from taxidermists, other fishermen. But that's how we learned about this stuff. Today, there is none of that. I think a lot of guys, they're too busy. They a certain amount of time to go fishing. And like you just said, Max, you have a professional job. There's things that you wish you could do, like what Gus is doing. He's out there fishing. He's doing it. By the very nature that Gus is sitting on that water as much as he is, he's going to learn things that you're not going to learn just because of the time frame that he's putting on the water. Right. I guess there's always such a thing as called risk and reward. He's taking a high risk on banking that this is what he's going to do for a living, and you're a little, you're a professional, you work in a profession, and you're probably stockpiling money, and you're going to have, lots of cash when you're older. And, Gus is going to be in the same boat that I am. I mean, I'm doing okay, Gus. Okay. But, when you get older, you kind of start thinking about, what if I would have done this?
Right.
But then at the same time, I have no regrets. I live life to the fullest. If I passed away tomorrow, I have done a lot of things that most people are never going to do. So, and in my case, it has to do with the fishing industry, and times are changing. But, I really appreciate watching guys like you come up the ladder. And, like I said, we touched about, some of the things that I feel are going on with muskies. That isn't something I read or heard. That's something I've noticed and been digging around for 55 years. I believe the fish are active, the strike zone is going to be wider. If you don't put that bait in that fish's face within that strike zone, it's going to follow. That's all it's going to do. And if, I think if people were spend more time learning their baits, so whether the fish are active, neutral, or inactive, that is going to determine whether they're going to turn those followers into strikers. Has nothing to do with size. These young guys today want to throw pounders. I think that's crazy.
I don't throw pounders much, really at all, honestly.
No,
no. And
you look.
No, go ahead.
No, you go up to Vermilion Dam Lodge. Okay, you know this. You're a young guy. Vermilion Lake, the trophy capital of the world. Everybody talked about all these big muskies coming from Vermilion Lake. When you walk in the Vermilion Dam Lodge, they've got a main beam in the lodge, and it's got all these muskie baits that caught 50 inches. Very few, non-existent baits over 9 inches hang on that beam. Most of the baits on that beam were 6 to 9 inches.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, it's just when people talk about, throwing pounders and big baits, catch big fish, that's fine. They can believe in what they want, but day in and day out, baits of this size, this bait right here, this muskie buster, it's a 6.5, 7-inch bucktail. Okay. That's all it is. A 6.5, 7 inches. You'd be amazed at how many 35, 38, 40-pound fish were caught on this little bucktail, in a 3 to 5 year period.
Right.
It's only 6.5, 7 inches long.
Our best baits are smaller. I mean, my biggest is on an 8-inch depth raider. Max's from Vermilion. It's on a bucktail that I made. Although it has big blades, it might have probably one of the smallest tinsel skirts you've ever seen. I mean, the profile is miniature. That bait is not long.
No, I agree with what you're saying.
We throw the 6, 7-inch minnow baits mostly. So,
no, I agree with you 100%. You don't need a big bait to catch a big fish. So Max said to me before, so are there any baits that stand out to you? I've been very fortunate because I usually get those baits in my hand a year or two ahead of time before they come on the market, Max. So I'm able to, I've already had some of these baits in my hand before now that people are seeing come out right now in the market. So, people come and say, Rich, what do you think? Is there some changes that you would make? that type thing. But there's a lot of good baits on the market this year. That's why I'm so pumped up. When I look at the floor of the Wisconsin Musky Expo this year, there is a lot of great bait makers on that floor. A lot. And it's because their baits do what needs to be done in order to attract a fish and to be consistent fish catchers. So, yeah, it's you think at my age that I'd have baits galore. I've kind of narrowed my baits down, to it might be disappointing to you. I used to have 4,800 baits in my collection. Think about that. 4,800 baits on my wall, not including what I knew I had in the tackle boxes. And now I've cut it back down to where I probably got about, I don't know, maybe 500, 600 maybe. My wife says 700. My wife says, maybe 700.
It's growing again.
So you never get tired. That's part of the romance. That's part of muskie fishing is 100%. I think bait collecting is probably as much fun as it is catching the muskies.
I could not agree more.
I agree that too.
So, well, real quick, we're kind of hitting a time. We like to kind of keep the interviews around. We can't thank you enough for coming on, but I do want to just ask a few more questions here and see if Gus has got any more. And one, I want to kind of circle back on from the start of our interview here. Were there anything you noticed or something you remember from those early days when you started fishing with Tony Rizzo, or any good kind of stories from those early times being out on the boat with him? Anything you noticed, how he conducted himself, or what he did that just kind of made him different right off the bat?
Tony had a sixth sense. I don't know where he got it from, but he definitely was different. Look, everybody's different in their life as to their beliefs and what, Tony was a very unique individual. Tony was a very godly man. I don't know of anybody that could recite the Bible. You could talk about a subject and he could verbatim talk about the scripture within the Bible. It was the same thing with fishing. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He was interesting. He would, in order to mark a spot, he fished a lot of clear water. And he would tie birch logs together in different shapes, and he would sink them so that when he was looking for a particular area, he would look to the bottom of the lake, and by the angle or by the way the log was tied, that's how he knew he was in the area where he needed to be. And then he would set up accordingly to fish that area. Okay. He had an inner instinct that I haven't seen in a lot of people. That's why when I reference, I would love to get in the boat with you, Gus, because I like to see what makes you young guys tick. Michael Hansen has that. I see things in Michael Hansen that I saw in Tony Rizzo. I did pretty good on the water, but I didn't have that. My wife says otherwise. She thinks I do. She's seen me do things that, she's not seen anybody else do. I saw that flash behind your back. I don't know what that was, but I see that he had an inner instinct. That's all I can tell you. And I see some people that have it, and most people don't. And it was unbelievable. The man was, I don't know. He had a different way. He had a different way about him, and he was very good, and he caught a lot of big fish, and he was a very humble man, but he had it. Michael Hansen is the one guy I see that probably has that. I see a lot of, I just see things that he has. I listen to him, watch him on the water, and he's got the passion and the tenacity. He's got it. You don't see it very often. Noah Binsfield is another one of those people. Noah Binsfield has that tenacity, that drive, passion. He's got something inside. So it's not a lot of people that have this, but there are great musky fishermen, and there are over the top. I think I think Brian Schaefer's one of those. In
Mhm.
all the years that I've known Brian Schaefer, we still haven't gotten in the boat with each other. So, I think this year we keep talking about it, but we never get there. But I think hopefully this year we will. So, um, did that answer your question, Max?
Yeah, no, I'm always, yeah, it did. I'm just always curious, to us, we're young enough where we really only know Tony Rizzo's name through, his books and, online forums, really. So, you hear these random stories, you'll just be looking at, say if there's a lake, that I'm curious about in Vilas County, I'll start doing research on it, and Gus will do the same, and we'll kind of send each other things we find just online from people chatting, whether it's muskie forums or whatever, what have you. And a lot of times you'll just randomly come across these hilarious stories of guys saying, "Oh, well, I was out there one day and I saw Rizzo, or I saw Rizzo doing this, or whatever." So it's always cool to kind of chat with somebody like yourself who has firsthand experience with a guy that was that caliber of a fisherman. So I'm always just kind of curious as to, how that happened, really, and
He
yeah.
still
So
fishes open water a lot. Yeah, I mean, when Tony was alive, he fished. I mean, most people can't do what Tony Rizzo does. There are people that talk about it, but Tony Rizzo literally, I can think of one of the last times Tony and I fished together, and we were fishing out in 60 feet of water. What people don't realize, we were fishing in 60 feet of water, but he was relating to a hump that was in 32 feet of water. These fish were probably about 100 yards away from that 32-foot hump, and we're fishing out in the middle of nowhere. He's dragging meat along with a side of, also we're throwing baits, because even though we're fishing in 60 feet of water, it doesn't mean those fish are in 60 feet of water. Those fish are only maybe 12 to 18 feet down. And I'm watching a 4-footer come out of the depths in 60 feet of water, sitting there staring at the sucker that, is sitting there swimming around, and the muskie's going around and around looking at that, that sucker, in that ultra clear water. I've seen that many, many times with Tony Rizzo. I'm telling you, Tony wasn't fishing 80-pound braid and 100-pound braid. He was fishing 25-pound mono. Matter of fact, years ago, I used to work with Cortland Line Company. You can look it up on your, let's say, you go to Google and you'll see musky mono. I was the background to that musky mono. It was a smoke black monofilament that was very similar to Maxima line, and it had very low stretch. It was stiff, and but when it hit the water, it was transparent. That's what Tony used to fish with, and that's what it was called. If you look it up, it was called Cortland Musky Mono. And now today, everybody fishes braid. So, the mono, except for Tony. Tony, when he was alive, he still fished with mono. I mean, people don't do that. I mean, Tony was fishing with fluorocarbon leaders long before anybody else was. Tony was the man that brought marabou to the market. Marabou bucktails, Tony Rizzo was the very first man that brought marabou tails, because he found in that cooler water that for some reason those fish seemed to eat marabou more so than they did bucktail in that colder water temperatures, and it still holds true to this day. So I do definitely better with marabou in the colder water temperatures. I was one of the last guys to kind of walk away from bucktails, but now I'm using tinsel because it is definitely tougher. I like the flash that comes off of the tinsel. And I was slow, but do I still throw bucktails? Yes, I still do. But for the most part, I throw marabou and tinsel most of the time. So,
Okay.
Even us old guys can evolve a little bit, we can make changes.
The tinsel
So,
craze.
huh?
The tinsel craze, that whenever that came about in like was that early mid 2000s or so? When
Yeah,
they
I would
started.
say so. And
Yeah.
like I said, I was one of the few to, switch, but it's getting harder to get longer deer here and, to make a good quality bucktail.
Yeah.
And there's companies that still make them. It's not that it's any less productive. It's just, I think tinsel is a lot more available and in a lot of different colors. And that's what guys are digging, just like in plastic worms for bass fishing. So,
For
Max, you
sure.
said you had a couple more questions.
Yeah. I mean, Gus, you looked like you had something there.
I mean, I just got one more kind of going off of that last answer that you had that I'd like to ask. It just
Yeah,
kind
go for it.
of, so when I started musky fishing, we didn't have any idea of what open water meant. Max and I, basically how we learned to musky fish was pretty much just off of each other and then, miscellaneous research here and there. We really didn't go out with guides at all until way later. I mean, we went on a few trips, but we didn't know what this open water meant. And then when we started, getting a little bit more into it and more involved, we kind of figured it out. And what I've now figured out after listening to lots of podcasts and lots of research on the internet, I think people have different ideas of what open water is because some people could say open water, but they're referring to a 6-foot weed bar that's in the middle of the lake, but it's quote unquote open water because it's not on shore. So they say anything that's not on shore is open water. But to me, open water is exactly what you were saying, 60 foot well off of a mid lake bar. What would you say open water is to you when you're talking about that for musky fishing?
Well, in Tony Rizzo's terms, first of all, I'm going to tell you this. We had just bought a house up here back in central Wisconsin. My wife wanted to go back to northern Wisconsin, but I've got to stay closer to, bigger hospitals. But what I was going to tell you is this: what I'm going to do when my wife, I think she knows I've got all of Tony Rizzo's books. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the summer suspended musky book that Tony Rizzo wrote. I'm going to take it down to a shop here, and I'm going to see if they can copy the book for you. So you can, because I think you're
Sure.
doing a lot of that open water fishing, and I think you're going
Hmm.
to learn a lot from that book. The baits might seem a little bit different for you, because
Sure.
what was that? What was this? But I think you're going to be able to correlate the baits you're using today to those conditions. 60 feet of water, you know, first of all, I'm going to tell you this: in drought conditions, the hotter and drier it is, the better suspended muskies fishing is. It's going to be better when we have wet, cold, summers. It's not as good. So when you get those bluebird days, and you're fishing out over that open water, it seems like the hotter and the drier it is, the further those fish suspend away from whatever structure. And structure could be
Hmm.
even a school of bait fish.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
you know, so to me, open water is literally fishing out in the abyss.
Okay.
And I think that, like deeper, I know Tony used to weight his suics. We've weighted our
Hmm.
bobby baits. Crankbaits are a big factor. Tony used to make a Rizzo diver that sank. Peter Hopt was another advocate of open water fishing and made a bait called it was made, what I'm trying to think what he called that. It was I don't remember what Pete called his bait, but it was made out of ironwood and it sank. And,
Interesting.
they're very hard to find today. Guys, collectors have sucked them all up, but the bait was made out of ironwood. And,
Hmm.
same thing. Pete caught fish up to 47 pounds on that bait. I think there's still a lot of good open water fishing out there. I don't think the younger people have really tapped it, but to answer your question, it's literally fishing for suspended fish out in the middle of nowhere. But then when you look, you've got to find, there's going to be a piece of structure of some type that those fish will relate to. And here's
Hmm.
another thing about fishing open water: most of those muskies, the magic depth is basically between 18 and 22 feet on clear water. Whatever that thermocline is, in that lake, let's take Trout Lake up in Boulder Junction. That thermocline on that lake usually runs about 18 to 22 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So those fish can be in that thermocline, or they're going to be above the thermocline in order
Sure.
to get those fish, and they will travel. Like I just said, think about it. With one push of the tail, if that fish is suspended in 18 feet of water and that bait is only traveling down to 10 feet and that fish is active out there, it'll move up 8 feet to grab that bait because it can feel it coming through the water. It's wiggling, it's pushing water, it's knocking. That's what a depth raider does. And
Mm-hmm.
it's knocking, it's making sound. And those fish will move up to take that bait. That being said, let's say the fish is inactive. That's where a bulldog, that's where a Medusa, with extra weight comes into handy, or a bowfin from Bam Bam. You're letting that rubber drop down into that strike zone. If they're inactive, that strike zone might be only 12 inches. You're going to have to put that bait in front of his face. I also believe, like rubber, the reason rubber is so productive, I don't think rubber basically is a non-threatening bait to those fish.
Yeah.
That's why I think they so readily eat rubber. I think
Hmm.
I think fish become acclimated to certain baits.
Oh,
Baits
yeah.
come and go because the fish become acclimated to them. But with rubber, there's nothing. It's non-threatening, so therefore they are good producers.
It's just
So
always gonna work for the end of time. Like a bulldog,
I
the
think it
single
is.
tail is always, they talk about it since it came out. It's still everyone's number one of their number one producers for rubber
Why it
baits
works. But
for a
if the
reason.
fish are active, bucktails are going to work, crankbaits are going to work, gliders. A lot of guys are afraid of gliders. And the fact of it is, I love a suic. If you're fishing up shallow, you're fishing over weeds, you're fishing over areas that are, shallow water structure, it's hard to beat a suic. A navin works well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bait on the market right now called a dipstick. You probably never heard about it, but it's made by a
Oh, yeah.
guy. His name is Adam up in Ontario. He
Yep.
makes a dipstick. And he named it dipstick because any dipstick can fish the thing. It works that well. Okay. But,
That's
it's
hilarious.
baits like that. Okay. That work and they catch a lot of big, they do well, but when those fish are suspended, I have a tendency to really like fishing gliders. I don't catch as many fish on a glider, but I catch bigger fish on a glider. So I have a tendency to throw a lot of gliders. We run a lot of minnow baits in my boat and a lot of bucktails. And of course,
Nice.
we're going to fish topwaters. You can't hardly
Yeah.
beat to fish a topwater. That's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
But everybody,
Oh, yeah.
but when you reach for a topwater bait, what do you reach for, Max? When
I
you're out fishing,
my
what are
not
you going
like
to
my
reach for?
favorite.
Right.
Honestly, it's a harder question for me to answer. It used to be the Suic Nightwalker. I used to love
Good
that
bait.
topwater
Catch a
bait.
lot of fish. Oh, it's a great bait.
Lately, last year, for whatever reason, topwater wasn't as good for us, and we wanted
You're right.
the one that worked well was the flap tail, but it was super specific conditions, specific time. Flap tail did well for us last year. And then I think I've had success. This is kind of weird, but anytime it drizzles or rains, I throw in the fat bastard. I've had a lot of fish I've had one fish eat during a torrential downpour on a fat bastard. And everyone's saying, well, don't throw top waters when it's raining because they can't hear it. And I had one of the coolest eats I've ever had on a fat bastard in a torrential downpour where I literally had said, this has got to be my last cast. I'm over this. And, it's ever since then, if it's sprinkling or raining, I'll throw on that fat bastard. So I don't know, again, if it goes back to what we talked about with frequencies and sound, if it's like that higher kind of squealy, pitch that the fat bastard gives off works better when there's other sound on the water. And, we've done really well on the flap tail, super low light, calm conditions, running it very slow. The Nightwalker has been good to us. And any of those conditions. But so that would probably be I know it's hard. I can't just give one, but
no, that's okay. Here's what I noticed. First of all, we're going to go back to one thing. Earlier, we talked about good rain gear. Okay. So
yeah,
you've proven to me why that's an important thing to have in your boat. Hopefully,
is.
some of these musky fishermen are listening to this. Will quit buying the cheaper brand rain gear and go out and drop a few $100s on rain gear so they can get out there and keep fishing. Because when you're fishing, you got to go when you go, because otherwise, that's the time frame that you have to fish. Secondly, two of the baits that you mentioned to me were basically tail baits.
Mhm.
I do like tail baits. And Lake X, fat bastards are awesome. The Dr. Evil, Tom, I mentioned Tom's Custom Musky Baits. He's got some tail baits that work well. But most of the time when I throw a topwater bait, I throw a walk the dog bait. I throw one particular one called the Walk of Death.
Hmm.
I throw toppers because everybody else throws tail baits. I throw toppers. I used to make a topper. The first one I made was called a Rich's Twister. It was made by Slammer Topwater Company, and they're no longer in business. The second one is TR Custom Lures, makes a bait called a turtle topper, and I actually made that bait prior to him. And I just basically said, Tim, you make it because I don't want to be in the lure making business. Okay. So you make them. And you can best bet when I get to the show, I've got two of them waiting for me at the TR custom booth. So, I throw toppers, but I also throw flap tails. I find it very, flap tails are starting to come into their own because 15 years ago, you couldn't get a guy to throw a flap tail. 15 years ago, they didn't want to touch a flap tail. The one flap tail that nobody has ever, you younger guys aren't aware of, it was called a snodlow. It was made in Rhinelander by Dave Snoddy, and it had this bloop, 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 bloop. Well, you know what? There's an old man in Rhinelander right now. His name's Edward Simon, and he's in Rhinelander, old timer, and he's making a bait that's almost identical to a snodlow, and every one of his baits have that teardrop, that drop. When the water's calm as glass, we like those, I like that type of sound on a flap tail. If there's a chop, I've done very well with witch doctors. But one thing I will tell you about flap tails, they don't catch a lot of fish, but when they do, they're big.
Yeah.
You ever notice that?
Yeah.
They're big fish. So,
They move the big fish too.
Huh?
They move the big fish too.
They move the big fish. Yes, they
find the
do.
location.
They're great fish finder baits. Like we had a stretch a few Augusts ago where it was like I was throwing a flap tail out of the front, and that would pull out these big fish, and then we would circle back and hit them over the head with something else to get them to go. But yeah, those flap tails are crazy. They catch big fish.
Same thing with walk the dog baits. They really move a lot of fish. They'll move fish when nothing else will. So basically, yes, I throw some tail baits, but I like toppers. I like walk the dog. I like flap tails, and that's probably the most fun. But even then, there's got to be something there that attract those. They got to be active. But my main rule is the quieter the water, the smaller the blade. The bigger the chop, the bigger the blade. Most people say there's a mystique of, or people talk about, top waters, early morning, late evenings, water calm as glass. Let me tell you something. When there's a front coming in, what associates with the front? Wind. So there's the water's choppier.
Yeah.
Okay. And the air starts to cool down. Let me tell you something. That really gets the fish moving. Barometric pressure's dropping. You got the front coming in. You got wind, waves kicking up. A big old glow bait or something like a Cannonball Junior or something that's going to push a lot of water. Tom makes a bait. I think it's called a RV bait, and it really's got a lot of push, a lot of sound coming off that bait, so top waters catch fish even in heavier, wavy water as well. So, guys, your younger guys you're dialed into that kind of stuff. I think when you're out fishing, you guys are asking a lot of questions and you want to learn. And I think your younger guys are quicker to adapt than we were, because I think fishing honestly was a lot easier back when I was younger. When I was 25, 30 years old, we had more muskies in the lake.
I mean,
we had,
Gus can tell you, Gus and I share a notes app that we both can add stuff to and we both see it. I mean, this is a year-long thing for us. We're always talking. I think just the other day, I called him and I had an idea on a modification of a bait that I was like, what do you think about doing this for, cave or whatever? And he's like, oh yeah, I like that. Let's add it. So, now we literally start building, our bait logs for certain things we want to try for this year. And that's been ongoing for years. We're always, but like you said, it's kind of the mystique and the fun of musky fishing is getting to catch these fish on so many different applications. That's part of the game, and that's what makes it a lot of fun.
Here's something you might want to check out also with what you do, Gus. There's a company going to be at the show called Cougar Baits. I've noticed that guys are fishing rubber and stuff like that, but I throw a lot of jigs, have for many years. 20 years ago, I was throwing jigs. This Cougar Baits, he makes my jigs. I usually basically use a heavier flipping stick with a Beast 40. PC Fun makes a 3, and they make a pretty good reel. And 13 fishing, same thing. But I use I throw a jig a lot, especially late spring, early summer. Post from conditions, you're putting that jig in their face. And if you get a chance, Gus, when you're at the show, stop by and see Max Kaufman. He makes a hell of a jig, very well made. He's got some underspins, and it's just a kept secret. And I think the younger generation is dialed into rubber. They're dialed into tinsel, or whatever they hear about, in a podcast or whatever. But I'm telling you, there's some things that people are not doing. Jigs. Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. I think people need to dial in on their gliders. Not all gliders do the same thing. And I think when people start to understand gliders, you're going to do a lot better on them. If you're there on Saturday at noon, I'm going to touch on that big time about, what gliders do, because I think people look at a glider or they look at a topwater bait and say, well, it's a topwater bait. It's a glider. And they all do the same thing. No way. Baits are tools. They all do something a little bit different that will work in certain conditions.
Yeah.
That's the key thing.
I'm definitely looking forward to talking with the Max Kaufman of Cougar Baits. I've actually messaged with him a little bit already this prior week, and I already sent him a picture last year. I attempted to make my own jig, tying it up myself and putting a trailer on it, and it stunk. I just couldn't figure it out. So I'm going to be picking up a few and not going through the work myself to try and figure that out, because that just took a lot of time to make like 2, and they just both were not good. They just did not do what I wanted to do.
I want to go fishing. I don't want to make baits. I want to go fishing. I want to put the time on the water.
Well, luckily this is like March or something, but
yeah, but I'm just like you guys. I live this year round. Penny will tell you. I'm always thinking. I'm always looking at maps. I'm breaking things down, drifts. How am I going to approach a body of water? What's out there? Is there a better mousetrap? I'm in my 60s and I'm still thinking that way. I think that passion still burns, in my mind, but I think my body's saying, it's kind of kicking me in the head, saying, stop it. You got to slow down a little bit. But in my mind, I think I'm still 25 years old. Sometimes my actions even show it too.
I can't say musky fishing is very easy on the body. Max and I are relatively young and we're already feeling a few of the aches. Even just like tournament fishing, when you fish that hard for that long consistently, that might be that's just deteriorating some parts of your body. It's incredible, but
it's because of the equipment you're throwing, Gus.
It's helping now, the longer rods and the super line, and I think so. at least
Now,
to throw for
tell you
longer. It's
what,
still
we
gonna hurt.
definitely are going to get together. Where you and I are going to get
Yeah.
together. We're going to go fishing, and
Uh-huh.
and I'm just for giggles. I'll have my rods, you have your rods, and
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna let you fish with my rods, and then you tell me what you think.
Okay. Yeah,
How's
I'd
that
love to
sound?
do that. That sounds good.
Yeah,
I
I think I understand the basics behind why everybody thinks longer is better, but there's other things that have to go with that. Size of your boat, how tall are you, what baits are you working within the boat? And they're granted,
mhm.
boats are getting bigger. I mean, I stepped into Jake Tapp's boat, and it's like stepping into the Titanic. I mean, it's this big Ranger. It's black. I thought I was entering Star Wars or something because the thing is
Shit.
just unbelievable. You could crawl in the rod lockers in his boat, but
Oh my
it's just
God.
crazy. I'm still fishing. I
That's
still fish out of a Tuffy Esox Magnum. I've got a 90 on the back. It
mhm.
serves my purpose. So I think equipment
Perfect.
has a lot to do with what size boat you're fishing out of. How
Hmm.
how tall you are. Um, it's just here's what I'll tell you from the rod building perspective. Right now, musky fishermen, would you agree that the average muskie we catch is 36 to 40 inches? Would you
I'd
agree
say
that
that's
that's
about
about right?
spot on. 36, 37. Yeah, that's average of what, goes into my boat year in, year out.
Here's my question. Please tell me why you need a tarpon blank to catch a 36 to 40-inch fish that are weighed between, say 12 to, say 40 inches, 18 pounds. Okay. Let's just say even 20 pounds in the fall time. So you're using blanks that are made for a 100-pound fish because that's
Right.
essentially what they're doing today. They're
Yeah.
using blanks that are made for a 100-pound fish. It's not needed. So just something to
Hmm.
think about.
For sure.
But you and I are going to get together and we're going to do that. And I'm going to see what you think of the equipment that I use. And then it might kind of, raise some questions in your mind.
It might answer a few, raise a few, just anything to learn a little bit more about the equipment that we're using. There's always that aspect of it. So I'm really looking forward to that, to setting up that in the future. Seeing you at the Wausau show. Max and I are both really excited for that one. We're looking forward to seeing you there. And Rich, I gotta say, really appreciate your time tonight here chatting muskies. I know that we could talk a lot longer, but I mean, for the sake
Sure.
of all our time, well, we're gonna save this, put a pin in it. I think we got to have you back on because you know, sometime after the Wausau show, we can always recap it, or maybe sometime later in the summer, say after we get in the boat and chat about tactics and bait mods, baits, this types of stuff to fish, all that, all the goodies that people want to hear about once we're all fishing on the water here in northern Wisconsin. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Enjoy spending more time talking with you about muskies. Max, looking forward to meeting you at the Wisconsin Musky Expo. I'm
Likewise,
looking
it's going to be a
forward to
good
having
time.
everybody out March 15th through the 17th. Come on out. It's a
Yep,
holiday.
got to be there.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
Got to be there. All right. Thank you.
All right, everybody. I hope you really enjoyed that interview we just had with Rich Reinert. We had a blast chatting with him about all sorts of different stuff, whether that was from Muskies way back in the day, Muskies now, the shows, bringing to you all the good stuff, all the goodies, and maybe, some thought-provoking things in there as well. Not just getting the gears churning, getting yourself prepared for the shows, what you need to look for. We got into a bunch of vendors that maybe not everybody knows about. Rich really offers just a fantastic lineup, always at that Wisconsin Musky Expo in Wausau. It's always been my favorite, and I'm just really looking forward to it. We're we're missing Brian here tonight, but Max and I can quick discuss, one of our takeaways from this interview here. So Max, what do you got for that?
Oh, I got a handful. There is one person I wanted to mention to give a little shout out to that I'm kicking myself for not bringing up. He'll have a boost. Springy Tackle Gus. He sent us
Oh
some
yeah.
of his baits. It was one. I think it was the first guy to ever send us anything. From listening to the podcast and whatnot, and wanted us to test them out. So yeah, our buddy Micah will be there with Springy Tackle. Go check him out if you're there. Amongst a plethora of other awesome booths that'll be there that we touched on with Rich. So takeaways, man, a lot of them from that interview.
Pick one or two, or
It's going to be hard to just narrow it down. I thought obviously the study with color was fascinating about how they
oh
actually had
yeah.
an actual scientist, from what it sounded like, kind of studying an eye doctor, or I can't even remember who it was now. Someone from the Marshfield Clinic was actually studying muskies' eyes and what they can see. I wasn't as shocked to kind of hear, but just interesting to kind of have some sort of base knowledge to confirm, our suspicions of those, flare oranges and chartreuses and greens are always pretty good. So yellows and browns, he touched on those.
All
And
of our
then,
favorite
for
colors.
me, yeah, all of our favorite colors. And me, I'm a sucker for old northern Wisconsin musky fishing stories. So pretty much all that stuff that he touched on with Tony Rizzo is fascinating to me. How he kind of pioneered a lot of the open water musky fishing, and all that stuff was just really interesting. What about yourself?
I gotta say the biggest thing, and I will for sure have more conversations with Rich about it because I want to learn a lot more, is that I would say my weakest game is probably topwater 100%. Not only does it lack with how much I use it, it lacks with what we own, and what we own is not very diverse. He seems to be an advocate of just all sorts of different top waters. I mean, we literally throw, for the most part, just, you know, the tail prop rotating baits or a flap tail. We tried walk the dog with no success yet, but we just haven't given it much run time. I've thrown globes, I've moved fish, not caught any there. So, just learning the applications for when those work, I think is really, really important. Because I mean, it's true. There's some days where straight up top water is all they want. I figured that out this year. I think we maybe touched on it when it happened, but there was a stretch in September. I had a bunch of trips in a row, and pretty much all I had the clients throw was a top water. And like I said, it was either a tail rotating prop bait or a flap tail, and for good reason, because they were getting smoked.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard to boat them those days, because the water was getting pretty dingy. It's the time of year when things kind of bloom up a little bit heavier before that turnover period. But, top waters, I think, there's a lot of takeaways from the interview, but top waters, I think, is the biggest one. Getting a topper stopper or buzz bait is, I don't know. There's all these terms that I need to learn and be able to utilize on a given season. Hopefully we have a better topwater season this year. It was pretty rough last year, to say the least. Even though I'd say we did throw it a handful of times, especially on some of the bender weekends, or when you or Brian were up, just because I know you guys like topwaters a little bit more than myself. But yeah, that was.
Well,
But
you're
yeah,
you're always you're always subjected to the back of the boat, so I feel like that's kind of where, I mean, you don't have a
that
hate for top water, but like if we're
there's.
fishing in front of you and we're throwing top water at prime time, you kind of take a back seat and typically will try to switch it up and throw something. So I mean, I'm just trying to give you the benefit of the doubt here a little bit with the top
Oh,
water, but
yeah.
you really haven't been able to form as much confidence with it as like Brian and I have, just because you're trying to swing, you're typically not throwing
Yeah,
it, you
that's
know.
true. Yeah, and I'm not going to be throwing. That's true. That's actually a very good point there, and that's something to be said with order of baits? That's another question I haven't really heard in a long time, and I used to hear a lot on podcasts. They'd always ask the guides, like, what is your order of baits? And typically it's the higher up aggressive baits up front, and then you kind of work your way back. And the third guy in the boat is usually doing cleanup with jerk baits, crank baits, rubber, pull paws. And I've thrown topwater in the back and no action. I think that's probably why. I think a topwater is just a fantastic first bait through lure. Probably I bullshitting a percentage here, but probably 95% of the time is, give or take. It seems like that.
Sure.
Um, But yeah, let's before we sign off here, because this is another, long formatted podcast. People seem to definitely be enjoying them. In these winter months, still got plenty of time to do the editing, and they definitely will shorten up as we get into the open water fishing season here shortly. I just want to reiterate that this weekend is going to be the Minnesota Musky Expo, March 8th to the 10th. This is coming out the day before that starts. Be sure to stop in at the Team Rhino Outdoors booth that Jeff has. I'll be there. I'll have the merch. Uh, he's also gonna have backlash hoodies, so we're gonna be fighting out who sells more. I'm just kidding. That's not happening at all, but he'll have plenty of merch and plenty of baits, and I'll be standing around. So if you want to find me and chat muskies or grab a hat or some stickers. I'll have some stickers to hand out as well. Come find me there. And then obviously we just did a whole podcast about it, the Wisconsin Musky Expo. That'll be March is it 15th to the 18th? Am I getting the weekend right there?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, 15th to the 17th.
There you go.
I'm losing it, man. It's getting late. That one I'll be sitting in the booth with Kyle Hunsader of Hunsy Tales with our good friend Nick Amrose as well. He's got his crankbaits. That'll be his first show, and I'm unsure if it's Kyle's first show either. I know he's been making those bucktails for quite a while, and there's some mutuals of ours that use them and do super, super well on them. Pretty much Canada down to Green Bay to southern Wisconsin, up here to northern Wisconsin. So definitely give them a check out. It's a different kind of a blade to be throwing out there. And Nick's crankbaits and dive and rise and gliders that he'll have are going to be just phenomenal paint jobs. He's been sending us pictures. I think we maybe touched on that.
They look
Just
great.
doing a great job. He's got so many just cool, unique. He's got this one that's going to have perch on one side and walleye on the other side. Can't remember what he exactly calls it, but
No idea.
if that's
Looks
not
cool
sold
though.
out, I'm nabbing that one. So looks dope, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's all the good stuff to be looking forward to here, as always. Find us on Instagram, Muskies on Tap, or my guide service, Suggs Fishing on Instagram, as well as Facebook. Um, Books are open for the 2024 season. Let's get out on the boat and catch some muskies, learn some cool stuff about these toothy critters. So, if you got anything else to add, Max, before we sign off here?
No, not really. I mean, yeah, socials, we seem to have picked up a few new listeners since kind of the show season started up, or maybe just you know, just more time doing this, I guess. I don't really know. But if you don't follow us on Instagram, take a look. We're trying to muster up some content stuff here to get us through the winter. But we'll be posting on that a lot more once we're actually out fishing. Maybe do something cool if we get to 2,000 followers or whatever dumb shit like that. We'll kind of just play it by ear. But I do want to touch on we're maybe potentially thinking about doing a March Madness type pool for all the people that listen to this and have the winner get some cool kind of either custom baits, custom bucktails that Gus would tie up, or maybe some Muskies on Tap merch. So just kind of throwing out some feelers for that right now. If you guys are potentially interested in doing something like that, let us know. Probably throw a poll or something like that up on Facebook and Instagram. But yeah, just kind of thinking about different ways to keep getting us through this this what seems to be a shortened winter. So other than that, I'm good. We don't have Brian to take us away, Gus. So maybe just roll right into the old outro music and call it a night.
Yeah, I think I agree there. I can't outro like that kid. So here comes the outro music.